Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome to our summit Dr. Valencia Porter. Dr. Porter is double board certified in preventive medicine and integrated medicine. She's the former medical director of the Chopra Center for Wellbeing in Carlsbad, California. She is a Vedic master certified in Ayurveda, in yoga, and in meditation. She's an expert leading her clients and patients through detoxification and really helping us gain a deeper understanding of the effects of environmental toxicants on our health. It was in fact her own healing journey through several chronic illnesses that led her to write the book, Resilient Health: How to Thrive in Our Toxic World, which teaches us how to cultivate our mind, body, and spirit health in our modern age. Valencia, thank you so much for joining the summit. I'm particularly looking forward to our conversation together.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. The topic of our interview together, to establish for ourselves resilient health in mind, body, and spirit, it's frankly really the central theme of this entire summit and running through many, many of the interviews that we've been conducting. So I'm very much looking forward to our particular conversation and to get your perspective on how we can foundationally create health. That's a dynamic health through all of our different systems, as you say, mind and the body and the spirit. So in your book, in Resilient Health, you emphasize for us the importance of this concept of expanding concentric circles, going from the innermost aspects of our physical being out to the external aspects of relationships, of society, spirit, and the environment, of course. Can you tell us more about that from your point of view and how you work with people in that setting?
Yeah, so as a physician, I'm trained as a Western, conventional medicine doctor, MD. But I found that my clients were not getting complete healing and found that often, especially for chronic illnesses, Western medicine just wasn't cutting it. And so many of these other factors really were important levers in allowing people to access the ability to really tap into healing and tap into natural healing. Most of my clients are looking for natural ways of healing, and they are, a little wary about using pharmaceuticals or want to use less and avoid side effects. And so really looking into the whole aspect of somebody's being and understanding who it is that has the illness versus just the illness versus, okay, you have this diagnosis, therefore this molecule is not behaving correctly. And then we have a single target with a single pharmaceutical. That approach really falls short so much of the time. And so my clients are looking for that holistic viewpoint.
Yeah. I very much appreciate what you're describing. For me, what you describe is the fulfillment of what was at least termed back in the late 70s, the whole person medical movement that launched to try to oppose or reform biomedicine as we knew it then, and frankly, as we still know it now, right? It's the dominant model. There's been a creeping in of now what we're calling integrative or whole person medicine. It's getting better, but we've got some ways to go, as you know.
Yeah.
You didn't learn this in your traditional MD in med school, right? How did you come upon this and get on this road?
Yeah, well, partially it was my own healing journey, and I've had a couple of major, situations that I needed to heal from. One was a chronic back issue that at the age of 25, I was told I needed a spinal fusion. At that time, I was in medical school, and I had seen what happened to people who get spinal fusions. And I was a dancer. I love to move. And so the thought of that really wasn't my cup of tea. And so I was seeking alternative forms of healing. I was seeking other ways to manage a chronic pain situation. But then when I started out in practice as a pediatric neurologist, that was really when I had to look outside of the conventional Western medical box, because I realized that my toolbox only had in it pharmaceuticals which had really devastating side effects for my patients and the patients of my colleagues. And then here these clients were coming to me saying, what about this gluten-free diet? This was, 20 years ago. What about that was when we didn't know what gluten-free was.
Yeah, we've come a long way.
Yeah, what about this gluten-free diet? What about homeopathy? What about osteopathic manipulation? And I would go to my colleagues and ask, and they'd say, oh, that's nonsense. Well, really what they should have said is, I don't know about that. So I recognized that I didn't know about that, but my patients were coming back to me, having gone out on their own. And I was like, well, you're getting better. There's something over there that I need to check out so that I can add to my toolbox and help people to heal instead of just poo-pooing everything that was not in my toolbox.
I very much appreciate the clarity of which you described, not only your realizations about what was going on, and then the next steps, and particularly with some of your other patients who are getting better doing things. And I think in many ways, that's been the story of this revolution of the integrative health movement. It started with people fixing themselves because the medical system wasn't doing it, and then coming and presenting to the system and seeing, physicians like yourself saying, okay, what are you doing that's different? So you started diving into books, lectures, additional trainings.
Yes, then I began my certification addiction. So I just kept looking and looking, and it was kind of like a leave no stone unturned approach, because I realized that my view was very limited. The conventional Western MD viewpoint is usually my view is the only view, and that's it. So I'm a little bit different there, in that I'm willing to accept that I don't know everything, and I would like to know. I would like to know more and evaluate. And we talk about evidence-based medicine in conventional medicine, and in my view, and you're a researcher, and maybe you can speak to this more, is oftentimes what we say is evidence is still inadequate. And when we look at studies, especially epidemiological studies, we're looking at evidence for a whole population versus evidence for an individual. And when you're working one-on-one with a client, they don't really care about the population. They care about what's going on with them. And so, I think more recently, there's a move to this N of one research where you are your own experiment and you are your own control, and looking at what works for you, because we are all so bio-individual. We all have our unique genetic makeup, in addition to having our own unique circumstances that turn those genes on or off. We have, all these dynamic things that are happening, so that evidence, that so-called evidence that we have, may not apply to that one person.
You mentioned a moment ago, one of your healing journeys was through chronic back pain. Is there any other healing journey you'd like to share with us relevant to your work, particularly your workbook?
Yeah, so several years ago, I had some health issues that were cropping up, joint pains that were migrating, brain fog, fatigue. A lot of things were really falling apart for me. And I felt like Humpty Dumpty because I was going to every practitioner all around San Diego County trying to figure out what was going on and how I could heal. And it turned out that I had chronic Lyme disease, which I had probably contracted decades earlier. But there were some triggers that probably pushed me over into the Lyme and the Bartonella coming out to the forefront, and really affecting my health in every way. Every system was affected. But one of those related to my environmental journey, and that is on one of the appointments, it was picked up that I had elevated mercury. And I had been a fish eater, but I remember one incident where I had one of those silver amalgam fillings and it was old. It was put there when I was a child, and it had fallen out, and I swallowed it.
You
So
swallowed it, then you had
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so my mercury levels had spiked up, and there was some thought that maybe that was part of the reason why I was having symptoms, but it was really more complicated than that. And mercury, we know, is a neurotoxin. It has neurotoxic effects, but it also really poisons so many other systems in the body. It poisons your mitochondria, affecting your ATP and your energy levels. And I think because I swallowed it, it really threw my gut health out of control, as well. And that's when I started to have a lot of GI issues also, which, ancient wisdom tells us that all disease begins in the gut. And I think many people now are coming around and paying attention to gut health and the microbiome, which I think is so important. So I'm really excited that people are coming again to that knowledge, because I have seen what a huge impact it makes on people's health when we address the gut.
Yeah, indeed. So you mentioned the mercury, that's an environmental toxin. As you know, I mean, our bodies, we've accumulated hundreds of different types of compounds. Some of them we can do things to reduce. You mentioned mercury. People often have mercury fillings removed. I'm familiar with another compound, glyphosate. Glyphosate is the Roundup herbicide. It's on a lot of our food. We can eliminate that by moving to an organic diet. So those are all good things. We have the power to make such changes, but there are a lot of compounds, we really can't. It's in the air, other aspects of food, perhaps we can't avoid. How do you work with people to come into the most ideal sense of health and actual health they can have despite, carrying these things?
Yeah. And, this was part of my journey as well, is that I had to look at everything. So it wasn't just that I had Lyme and Bartonella. It was, what was the situation in my body that allowed those to thrive? And how could I make my own body less hospitable and to those organisms? And so it was about cleaning up my internal and external environment. In my journey, I also happened to look at my genome and discover that I had detoxification SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, that make it so that I can't process these environmental toxins well. So they are more of a stress to my system. I need more antioxidants than most people. I need more other types of detox support. I also don't detoxify mercury well. So that filling wasn't, being released in a normal way, even though we know that mercury is toxic. So really looking at cleaning up the whole environment. But when I started on that journey, it was scary because there is so much out there. As you said, we are swimming in this chemical soup. Since World War II, more than 80,000 new chemicals have been released into the environment, and very few have been adequately studied. And if so, they're usually just studied one at a time, not in this complex mixture that we're exposed to. Glyphosate being one of them, but many other of the, especially herbicides, all of those pesticides and herbicides, they were originally developed in World War II to kill people. So why would we not think that they have human health effects? They were then modified to have a purpose, but it's really, blasting these plants and our environment with a broad spectrum instead of really a focused, integrated look at how to control these things. So that's part of the reason why I wrote Resilient Health, is because I felt like people needed a clear guide to understand, number one, what is the risk? So we assess what is going on. What am I being exposed to? Number two, is that affecting me or not? So for example, I have a gene that makes it so that I can't process mold toxins. Well, my husband doesn't have that gene. He can be in a moldy environment and be totally fine, whereas I would be suffering and get quite ill. So, is it something that's going to affect you or not, and to what extent? And then what can we do about it? Are there things that we can do to mitigate the risk? And in environmental medicine, the first three steps of dealing with an environmental toxicant, number one is avoidance, number two is avoidance, number three is avoidance. So we want to try to avoid exposure as much as possible, but sometimes it's not possible. And then we see what can we do then to optimize our health so that we are not as affected by those substances, either by supporting the detoxification system or providing, antioxidants, if that's the pathway that it's going to affect, or providing mitochondrial support if you're dealing with a mitochondrial poison. So really supporting where the person is and the situation that they're in, which, everybody has a unique situation, but, avoidance is really key. And at that time, I live here in Southern California, and all of these juice cleanses were becoming popular. And I saw people, attempting to be healthy and support detoxification, but really only doing it in a very narrow-minded way. And, sometimes doing a juice cleanse with non-organic juices. So I did have a patient once who was like, I am super healthy. I'm getting these green juices from a restaurant chain, not restaurant, a grocery supermarket, healthy supermarket. I don't know, I don't want to mention the name, but it was non-organic. And this person ended up having neurologic issues. And so I delved deep into, figuring out, what are people doing? What is this person being exposed to? And we discovered this green juice. We discovered that it was not organic. And when we measured his levels, we found that his organophosphate pesticide levels were sky high.
Gosh, he was just dosing himself, incredibly so.
And
I'm
he
so
thought he was
glad.
being healthy.
Yeah, I know that's often done, unfortunately, and I've done it myself, where I'll launch onto something. I think I've been told this is good, and I start doing it, and I haven't done it properly. I didn't do a deep enough dive on the research. But what you just said, I'm glad, because that's a very practical piece for our listeners, attendees of the summit, because a lot of folks go out and buy juices, but your point is make sure it's an organic product.
Yeah. And, the flip side of that too is, we can become obsessed about being clean and being non-toxic, which I certainly went through that. There is actually a condition called orthorexia, where it's like obsession with healthy eating to the extreme. And so I would say, if there's organic available, get the organic. But if you have no other choice, still eat the fruits and vegetables. They are still going to give you benefit. But if you have the choice, get the organic, especially, the EWG puts out the Dirty Dozen list. So, this guy was eating, I think probably 5 items in his juice that were on the top 10 Dirty Dozen list. He was like kale, celery, spinach, all these things.
Strawberries, perhaps.
What's that?
Strawberries, perhaps. I know they're on that list.
They're always on that list too. Yeah. So he didn't realize the good thing about switching over to organics is that those organophosphate pesticides are water soluble, so they leave the system very quickly. And so within a week, you can see the levels drop. And there have been a number of studies, for instance, in changing children's the food that they serve at school, switching over to organic and seeing the levels drop within a week. So that's the good news.
That is very good news. Otherwise, it would be discouraging,
Yeah.
that state of affairs you're describing. You mentioned the microbiome. Yes, the darling of medicine these days. And I know a properly functioning microbiome, and this is something historically Ayurveda has emphasized, has so many valuable effects for our overall health and sense of well-being. I also know the liver is kind of on the front lines of for detoxification of these xenobiotic chemicals. What are some tips for us to take care of the liver, particularly with what foods and so forth?
Yeah, so number one is try to not stress your liver. And we know some of the stresses to the liver are things like alcohol, Tylenol or acetaminophen. Those types of things will put additional stress on the liver. So if you can do without them or cut down, that is very helpful. Many of our medications, our pharmaceuticals, are processed through the liver as well. So that's one, is to not stress your liver out. And then, my book really starts out with food and puts food at the base of the pyramid, because what I've learned over the course of my career is that food is medicine, and we really can heal through foods, through good foods, and by shifting our nutrient status, by shifting the microbiome. It's amazing what a good diet can do for you. So there are many healing foods that help support the liver function. And it's funny, in my house, my kids joke. They're like, you are the vegetable queen. So eat your vegetables, especially the green ones, especially the brassica or cabbage family. So broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, kohlrabi, bok choy, all of that family is very supportive for the detoxification system and for the liver.
Thanks.
Yeah, the phytonutrients in the deeply pigmented fruits as well, especially berries, those are also great for you. And then there are certain herbs like milk thistle, which we've heard about. Milk thistle can be taken as a supplement. You can also take it as a tincture or tea, but it's most easily taken as a supplement that you can easily get at any health food store. And that is very supportive for the liver as well.
Great. We've spoken a little bit about Ayurvedic medicine. I know that you're also certified in functional medicine, and I think you've hinted at the role of functional medicine for you in your practice. You've mentioned you get genomics and SNPs and so forth. What would you like to share with us about functional medicine and that approach and its importance?
Yeah, I love functional medicine. And when I first came across it, I had already studied Ayurvedic medicine, which is really it's an ancient system of medicine from India dating back thousands of years, and really looks at the whole system. It looks at, food as medicine. It supports the mind, body, spirit. And we're also looking for the root cause and to solve the problem, not by putting a Band-Aid on at the end, by seeing like what's at the root of this, what is driving this person to have this illness, and focusing on healing from the inside out. So to me, functional medicine is like Ayurveda. It's very much like Ayurveda. We're looking at the roots. We are looking at the whole person. We are looking at the mind, body, spirit. But what I love about it is that there's also labs. And I'm a data-driven person. And I think many of my clients appreciate seeing the data. It's one thing for me to say your dosha is out of balance. I can see that, by my exam, by checking your pulse. But it's another thing for somebody to see on a lab report, whoa, this is really out of balance. And what is the effect? What is the consequence that's coming from that? So it gives a little bit more quantification for people to be able to really see, I have to take action on this, and I have a goal of what I'm looking for, of what I'm trying to achieve with these therapies. And it really helps me to also target the approach as well. So I feel like, to me, it saves a little bit of time in getting that person to get a result, because it's less of, intuition and trying to see, well, what is the most important thing?
Yeah, indeed. And I think often when patients can see hard numbers, labs, that's motivating then to start implementing the changes in this case that you would recommend for them.
Yes.
I'd like you to speak a little bit more about the importance of healing rhythms of nature. And I know that, again, this is part of a lot of traditional systems, including Ayurveda, for us to be aware of, observe, somehow take advantage of, incorporate in our day-to-day, month-to-month lives. So how do you work with the rhythms of nature with your patients?
Yeah, I love this aspect, and I love the Ayurvedic approach to it as well. So sometimes I might not call it by the Ayurvedic names, but the principles always behind this. And it's really because our physiology has developed along with these rhythms. And while we may be able to get, a specific food at any time of the year because we have, jet travel and artificial ripening of fruits and things like that, it's not necessarily the way to be balanced and in harmony with the environment. So what I have found is that when people are more in harmony with those natural rhythms, are more in harmony with the environment, their health is dramatically improved. And I came across the research of Dr. Sachin Panda, who is from Scripps, one of the research institutes over there. And he was looking at circadian rhythms, specifically looking at weight and timing of eating. So this was several years ago, and it came out about time restricted eating and really narrowing that feeding window, which now a lot of people are doing, these prolonged fasts overnight, which now we see that there's health benefits. But he took it to, a whole another level and was looking at, how does this impact not only our weight, but our longevity and our overall health. And his research validated that there are these three core rhythms by which our bodies regulate their systems, and our hormones and our gastric function, our brain function, all of these things have a cyclical rhythm. And so I'm always trying to help people maximize everything that they get. And so my encouragement is like, how can we go with the flow instead of trying to swim upstream?
Go with the flow.
If your insulin is working best at this hour, let's feed it. Let's feed your body at that time when the insulin's working best. If your detoxification is going to work best at a different hour, then let's allow the detoxification to happen at that time. So really tapping into these windows and cycles so that we can have this harmony and not fight so much against our own body and against nature. Nature usually wins. So might as well get on her side.
Do you have, well, I want to start with some of the blogs you've written. I went to your website and went through some articles, and I thought could have a little fun. And I want to give a title of, say, a particular article you've written and ask you to make some comments about it.
Oh, fun.
And before we do, I wanted to ask the question of what you were just speaking about. Do you have an article, I don't recall seeing it, on how for us, we could read it and get a better sense of how to start adapting ourselves to the rhythms of nature for our health and well-being?
Yeah, I think I did write one last spring. It might have been titled like Time for a Change or something like that.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, and I think, with COVID and everyone, everybody's schedules were totally upended. And of course, people were very concerned and consumed by the media and perhaps staying in front of screens too long. I think that led to my impetus of why I wrote that, because I saw a lot of people getting out of balance. Whatever their routine, their schedule was, they didn't have that anymore. They didn't have a grounding for their schedule, their routine. So I said, okay, here's what's ideal according to Ayurveda, and try to get as close to that as possible.
Great. Okay, here's the first one. How to use houseplants to clean indoor air.
Yeah, so NASA did really cool study a while ago, and took a bunch of houseplants and saw what chemicals they were able to remove from the air. Chemicals like formaldehyde, which is in a lot of particle board, it's in a lot of our clothing, it's in a lot of our furnishings. So formaldehyde is an indoor air concern. Styrene and benzene. So there's some plants that remove those. Those are carcinogens, and they are often also in our home furnishings. Things like memory foam mattresses, off gas. Those materials, they do not reveal what's actually in their product. I've bugged them about that. So we don't even know what's in their product. But my clients, when you test their urine, looking at these non-metal toxins, a chemical signature comes up from sleeping on those. So there are houseplants that can help to mitigate these environmental toxins, and I think that's a lovely way to do that. Like air cleaners, air purifiers are sometimes necessary and they're powerful, but if we can bring a little life, a little nature into our homes, I think that's an added bonus.
Great. All right, here's the next one. Are you experiencing nature deficit disorder?
Yeah, so that's another thing. I truly believe in the healing power of nature. So sometimes we can bring plants into our home, but there are so many benefits of getting out and into nature, from being physically active to breathing in clean air to even breathing in what those plants are letting off. So there are some healing chemicals that the plants breathe out and then we can breathe in, which is tremendous. And then just really, again, getting in harmony with nature. It's just so incredibly healing. We usually try to take a trip each year to get out into the wilderness. And I just find that to be so balancing and so wonderful. So if we can bring nature in, there's actually a lot of research on the healing power of nature. And if you can't get into nature, even just looking at pictures of nature has a positive effect. So that can help.
I did not know that, but I have heard of this phenomenon of forest bathing, which is, akin to what you're speaking about.
Yes, exactly.
Well, speaking about being outside, that's a segue. So the next article is why your sunscreen's ingredients matter.
Yes. So yeah, when we're outside, skin cancer is one of the leading cancers in the world. It is a huge problem. And so moving beyond that, has been this impetus to using sunscreen. And there are a couple of things that can help protect our skin from UV damaging rays. And there are physical barriers, which are the minerals, like we see zinc, the zinca, which, the surfers have on their nose. But that's really white and people don't want to have like a pure white face. I think, who was it? Was it Zuckerberg who got teased by having this white face with his sunscreen. So the other sunscreen is chemical sunscreen. And many of these chemicals are toxic, especially to the reproductive system. They're, estrogen mimics. And, when I was dealing with my illness and deep diving into all these chemicals, I also have a very strong family history of ovarian cancer and breast cancer in, first degree relatives. So I'm really wary about these environmental estrogens. And one thing about these endocrine disruptors, these EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, is they only have to be a small amount to have an impact, because that's how hormones work. Hormones, when we give them to somebody as a prescription, we give it on a microgram dosage. We give very small amounts and they have very big effects. So these small amounts of chemicals can have a big effect. And that's why we need to pay attention to what's in our sunscreens. There are some natural oils that can have some of a protective effect, but they, you need to constantly reapply. So I would just warn people, if they're going to make their own homegrown sunscreen, which some people do, and I've seen some recipes online, really you only get about an SPF of 8. So that's pretty low.
So from your point of view, what would be an ideal SPF to target?
Well, it depends on your skin type, your skin risk, where you are in the world too. I think the thing about sunscreen also is we need vitamin D. So if we are using sunscreen all the time and blocking the production of vitamin D in our body, that's also an issue. So it really is a balance, so I'll just tell you what I do. So I live here in Southern California. I try to get unprotected sun exposure to like my arms and my legs for at least 20 minutes a day. But I do protect my face and, some areas that are have become more sun damaged. I was bad as a kid. I allowed myself to burn. So, so I do use a non-chemical sunscreen with an SPF of 30. So,
30.
But I live here in Southern California, so there's a lot of sun.
Yep, indeed. All right, next article, the karma of consciousness. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so again, so this one I wrote in response to some of the situations that were going on in the last year. And really, it's about taking a mindful approach to your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions, and understanding that all of those have consequences for ourselves as well as the people around us and our society. So it was really a call to be mindful, to pay attention. And, people think of the word karma, they kind of give like usually a bad connotation to karma, like, oh, something bad happened, it's bad karma, But karma, the word karma is a Sanskrit term, and it actually means action. It does not have a value placed to it. It doesn't, we don't call it good or bad. It's action, and it's looking at, this wheel of consequences. You do something, there's an action, and then there's a consequence. And then from that consequence, there might be another action. So, just understanding what our own personal role is in the world that we are co-creating.
I very much appreciate that. You're having us bring our awareness not only to ourselves and the consequences of our actions, but those around us. I mean, let's face it, we're really socialized in the West to be very individualistic. It's more about me than anything else or anyone else, and certainly the environment historically. I mean, that's been turning around. I hope you agree. I really appreciate that perspective. We are one, inclusive in this massive environment, and none of us are individuals in the sense of living in a bubble, so to speak.
Definitely. Yeah. And especially, in response to the environment, a lot of times, and I think the mindset is shifting now, but for a long time, people have thought of the environment as something external to themselves. This is me. That's my environment. But in reality, it's all the same. Because where is our breath coming from? It's coming from our environment. Where is our food coming from? It's coming from our environment. Where is, the blood that's circulating in my body definitely comes from the water that I'm consuming. Where is that water coming from? It's coming from the environment. So if we don't look at the environment as an extension of our own being and take care of it as if our lives depend on it, because our lives do, then we're in deep trouble.
Words of wisdom. May those words continue to propagate.
Thank you.
So question now is, what current projects or perhaps new directions with your work, could be with your patients or other types of work you do, are you particularly excited about these days?
Yeah, so I'm combining my passion for nature, for cleaning up the environment, for using food as medicine. I'm combining all of that in a partnership with a regenerative, sustainable, organic urban farmer and a chef. And our collaboration is called Farmer Chef Physician. And we are working on bringing education about food and eating healthy and organic living, as well as bringing, this farming system to urban environments. So part of my background is I have a degree in public health as well. And in my studies and in my experience, I worked at LA County Hospital. I went to University of Southern California Medical School. So working in downtown LA at LA County Hospital, I know that there are food deserts. These places where people don't have access to organic foods, so going to get a green juice is not an option for them. Their option may be a corner store that has, a small basket of fresh fruits and vegetables. So really being able to get these healing foods into the hands of people where they need it the most. These urban populations tend to also be where there's such a high concentration of people with chronic illnesses that are lifestyle based. They need these healing foods. So this collaboration, I hope to see flourish. And, it could not only provide food, but also jobs to people, good paying jobs, and, revitalizing the local economy, as well as reducing greenhouse gases because it acts as a carbon sink. In addition, if you are growing that produce locally, you don't have to transport it. You don't have to use fuel to transport fruits and vegetables thousands of miles. So the farmer that I'm working with, he already has this up and running in Orange County. He's collaborating with Second Harvest Food Bank up there. And he's proven that this model works, and you can put it on top of concrete. You can put it on top of asphalt. You don't have to have farmland, beautiful farmland. So I'm really excited about this project because I think it heals on multiple levels and really can be a sustainable solution.
I find what you just described incredibly inspiring. I'll look forward to learning more about it. I assume it's on your website, yes?
I have to update my website.
You must update your website. You just shared with us that people don't want to go.
Yeah, I'll write a blog. I'll write a blog post about that.
Write a blog.
Yes, that's the easiest way.
Maybe create a website. So it's Farmer Physician Chef or Farmer Chef?
Yeah, farmerchefphysician.com actually is a website. That is up and running. So
Okay.
yeah, he's doing great work. I'm just a partner and looking forward to helping to educate people on how to use these wonderful foods. But he's doing a lot of the hard work. But I am so excited because everybody deserves access to these foods, not just wealthy people. So
yes,
let's figure out how to make that happen, because if we can heal the food, that plays such a huge role in reversing and preventing chronic illness. More than half of US adults have a chronic illness. Many people have multiple chronic illnesses, and these can be greatly ameliorated by using a food as medicine approach.
Thank you for sharing with us that particular initiative, Valencia. I find it very inspiring. Number one, it's clearly important, and I wish you all success with it.
Thank you so much.
I also want to thank you very much for participating in our summit. I really enjoyed our conversation. You're very enthusiastic and very lucid in your descriptions of all the work you've been doing. And you've also referred us to quite a number of resources to help us begin to cultivate that foundation that you write about, foundation of mind, body, and spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. Namaste.
My pleasure.